The anime started with Sung Jinwoo, who is your typical Chad. Joking, he's an ugly loser with nothing on his life. His father went to buy milk and his mother is in a coma. This leaves him a broke, useless guy who must feed his younger sister with his E-rank hunter skills. 10 years ago, huge gates appeared all around the planet releasing several monsters to destroy the population. Humanity had no chance to fight them as weapons didn't deal any damage. Yet, suddenly some humans awakened some special powers. Those humans are known as hunters. Hunters are classified based on their magical power from E rank to S rank. Humanity managed to survive for the next couple years with these new powers, but they still must clear the dungeons that show up. If they don't, the dungeon will accumulate magic and open up, releasing monsters back into the world. 3 years ago that thing happened in a nearby island. S-rank dungeon wasn't cleared and monsters filled the island. Hunters tried to clear it, but in the end the ant monsters were stronger. Present day, we see several men around a construction site. One of them, named Kim, is getting some coffee as the server wishes him good luck with today's raid. Another guy named Park calls Kim out. Kim asks him what he's doing here. Is he quit being a hunter? Park explains that his wife is pregnant, therefore he needs to make some money. Kim replies that there's nothing better than a good raid to make some money. However, Park is worried because his skills were already bad and he feels he will be worse since he hasn't raided in a while. Suddenly, everyone's attention turns to Jinwoo, who's just arriving at the scene. Jinwoo stays humble, mentioning that he's looking forward to work with everyone today. Even Kim greets Jinwoo asking if he's already eaten. Jinwoo confirms and continues walking. Park gets curious and asks if Jinwoo is a strong hunter since everyone seems happy to see him. Yet, Kim giggles as he realizes that Kim retired before Jinwoo started to raid. Kim reveals that Jinwoo has a special nickname, the weakest hunter of all mankind. Park is confused because he was expecting something like the strongest. Kim explained that Jinwoo is an E-rank hunter who always gets injured even in E-rank gates, therefore, people call him the weakest hunter. However, Kim thinks that since Jinwoo is here, this dungeon is going to be easy to complete. Kim tells Park to stop talking about it because Jinwoo might hear them. However, Jinwoo sighs as he could hear everything. While walking, Jinwoo hears a familiar voice mentioning that he's hurt again. He notices Juhee and greets her, mentioning it's good to see her again. She asks about what happened to his face, but he replies that some stuff happened. She asks what happened to him and he decides to explain the story. She finds out he ended up hospitalized and he reveals that despite raiding E-rank dungeon, he was the only one who got hurt. She's confused on how, but he explains that everyone else was high-ranked so they didn't bring in healer. She complains about it because they think everyone is overconfident they wouldn't get hurt. Yet Jinwoo admits that it's his fault because he's weak, but still he's already used to getting hurt. Jinwoo then notices it's about time to start raiding and tells her to get going. They meet Song Cheol, an experienced hunter who asks if they're fine with him taking charge and being the party leader. Since he's the highest rank, everyone agrees. With all set, they open the gate and enter the dungeon. As they get in, Kim tells Jinwoo to stay close to avoid getting hurt. Jinwoo pulls out his knife, mentioning this is the only piece of equipment he can afford, but still he will give his best today and enters the dungeon. Meanwhile, Go Gun-hee, the president of the Hunter Association, tells his right hand that he met the government who asked them to avoid dungeon breaks. However, they also demanded them to supply goods that have been acquired inside dungeons. He doesn't feel like those demands are unbearable as they make money from reselling goods obtained from the dungeons. Those goods are crystals that people obtain from slaying monsters. Inside the dungeon, Jinwoo is seen covered in blood with a crystal in his hand. He's happy that he managed to defeat a weak goblin, but Juhee tells him to be careful. Another goblin attacks him, but he manages to block the attack. The goblin continues attacking, but he evades everything. He gets a chance to attack and tries to piece the goblin. Yet, upon contact his blade shatters. The goblin wastes no time to stab him. Juhee is worried about him, but Park comes forward and defeats the goblin. Jinwoo removes the blade from his stomach and lays on the floor as he's losing blood. Park tells Juhee to heal Jinwoo while he defeats the nearby monsters. Juhee rushes to Jinwoo's aid and starts using her healing skills. While being healed, Jinwoo sees everyone easily defeating the monsters and feels envious. President Go continues to explain that essence stones obtained from high-rank monsters can be used to make stronger weapons, which in return enables hunters to defeat stronger monsters. He also mentions they can obtain mana crystals mined from dungeons and make weapons with it. However, its quality ain't that effective. His right hand doesn't understand why the government wants them, and President Go explains they want to use them to create a new type of energy, safer than nuclear and more efficient than the normal energy sources. That will lead to less pollution, creating a true green energy, but they can only create it if the hunters clear the dungeons. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo was healed and the group managed to defeat the boss. Joo-hee is healing him again and asks why does he want to become a hunter so badly. She explains that if he keeps doing the same thing over and over again he will find himself in big trouble. Jinwoo apologizes, but Joo-hee complains she doesn't want an apology, she's just worried about him. Song talks to everyone, explaining the raid is about done and everyone starts talking about their drops. Jinwoo then looks at his essence stone and feels pity for himself. He risked his life, just a pitiful reward. Suddenly, another guy shouts, mentioning there's another entrance nearby. Everyone is confused, but Song reveals that sometimes there is double dungeons. Some see this as something strange, but most of them think this means their rewards will be bigger. Song talks to the group, explaining that the dungeon gate doesn't close unless they also defeat the second dungeon's boss. Usually they should report this situation to the Hunter Association and wait for a decision, but that also means other hunters might come and steal this boss. He decides to make everyone vote if they should go for it or not. There is 13 members in total, half of them vote yes while the rest votes no. Jinwoo is the one who will decide the fate of the party with his vote. Jinwoo thinks to himself that this dungeon is too dangerous for him, but he's broke and he must find a way to send his sister through college. He also has to pay the fees for his mother treatment, therefore, to protect his family he decides to say yes. Meanwhile, we see some people perform their Hunter Awakening examination in the Hunter Association. A guy places his hand on a black crystal and they measure his amount of power. We find out that there are several groups called guilds. They recruit hunters with potential and train them in order to complete dungeon raids. However, the strongest hunter in the country is known as Cha Haein, a guild vice leader. She's a cutie blondie who's an S rank. Back inside the dungeon, some members think they're venturing too deep. They've been walking for 40 minutes already and mention they have 1 hour to leave the dungeon after defeating the boss. Therefore, they have about 20 minutes of leeway. Jinwoo uses this chance to apologize to Joo-hee. She asks why and he explains that he's the reason why she was forced to stay and defeat the second boss. Joo-hee says she's okay and he shouldn't worry about her. He insists asking if she's sure, but Joo-hee reveals that she's mad. She yells at him asking if he's a psycho. She explains that if he was stabbed a little higher he would have a hole in his chest. Not only that, but his arms and legs were almost removed. She also reveals that her B-rank healing barely managed to heal him. She calls him reckless and asks why did he agree to come. She asks if he hurt his head and asks for an answer. Jinwoo apologizes and thinks to himself that the only reason why he's still alive is because Joo-hee is a B-rank healer. If it wasn't for her, he would be dead. She asks if he's really sorry and he confirms. She suddenly flirts with him, mentioning that he should repay her with a dinner date. Jinwoo is confused, but she gets mad asking if he doesn't want to spend time with her. Jinwoo blushes, literally explaining she's out of his league, but he would love to. Suddenly, someone mentions they have arrived to the boss room. Some members are confused because they never found a boss room with a door before. They think this is strange, but Kim asks if they're going to head back empty-handed after coming this way. He claims that they could be the first ones to discover the new dungeon, therefore, if anyone wants to return they can. However, he will be going and even if it's alone. Meanwhile, the guy who performed his hunter examination is watching President go in a video. In short, he explains how careful they should always be and survive despite their rank. Back in the dungeon, they all open the doors and step inside. The torches all around the room start to light up as they step in. Some are impressed as they've never seen anything like this room, but they should hurry up and look around. The group sees several statues standing around the room and Jinwoo notices another one sitting on what it seems to be a throne. Jinwoo thinks this one is the bigger one, but the group starts to mention how they feel like they're being watched. They then notice something strange. There are no monsters inside the room. Song then notices the floor and sees what it seems to be a magic circle. Kim calls Song out, mentioning there is a statue with something written. Everyone gets near the angel statue and notice the inscription. Song reads it out loud, mentioning those are the commandments of the garden and temple. First, they must worship God. Second, praise the God. Third, believe in God and those who don't obey should die. Joo-hee freaks out and calls Jinwoo, mentioning the eyes of the giant statue moved and looked at them. Jinwoo was confused and says she must be imagining. Suddenly the door closes. Everyone freaks out wondering if they're trapped. One of the members starts walking towards the door, complaining they didn't want to come here in the first place. He touches the door and suddenly a statue moves and slices his head off. Everyone is shocked and starts screaming. Jinwoo falls into despair, thinking about the rank of the guy who just died. He knows the guy was way stronger than himself. The statue returns to the original position, but Jinwoo still cannot move as the guy was killed in an instant. He doesn't understand who this monster could be in a D-rank dungeon. Jinwoo then looks at the bigger statue, paying attention to every detail until he sees its eyes moving to look at him. Jinwoo starts having a flashback about the moments he faced life and death situations. He was separated from his team during his first raid and ended up injured by E-rank monsters, forcing him to spend several weeks in the hospital. Later, he almost starved to death while trapped in a maze. He explains that hunters spend their money earned from essence stones to buy more weapons to defeat stronger monsters. However, he always only had money to buy cheap butter knives. If the knives broke, he would be forced to fight the monsters with his fists. He didn't even have money for clothes, but he kept going. He never earned much money and was always mocked by other hunters. Therefore, he always looked for loopholes to survive. He had to observe everything in detail to get his chance. Upon returning to reality, Jinwoo shouts at them to get down. The statue shoots a laser beam with its eyes, slaying several hunters. The ones who survived are shocked at this scene and start to panic. Luckily, Jinwoo managed to save Juhee, but she's panicking in fear. He looks around confused about what happened and how they ended up like this. He knows they're trapped and cannot escape. In the end, he freaks out because he knows they will all die. The story continues. Upon looking around, everyone's minds only think about running. Yet, Song orders them to stand still because if they get up they will be attacked. Juhee is still shaking in fear and Jinwoo tries to calm her down. Song approaches Jinwoo and tells that if he didn't warn them, everyone would be dead by now. He asks how Jinwoo knew about it, but he replies that he just sensed danger. Jinwoo then notices that Song's arm is missing, but the old man says it's okay and asks him to stop the bleeding. Jinwoo warps bandages around Song's arm. Song explains that usually he would ask Juhee to heal him, but she cannot deal with frightening situations. For that reason, she's only going on easy raids, despite being a rank B healer. Song also reveals that he's been into some B rank raids, but knows that this place must be A rank dungeon, but he then corrects himself saying this is an S rank dungeon. He then remembers the angel statue and the commandments of the carton and temple. He repeats the commandments and Jinwoo thinks the god mentioned on those rules is the big statue. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's younger sister Jina is at school talking to her friend Songi, who missed the early classes. However, Songi ignores her question and asks if Jina's brother is a hunter. Jina confirms but mentions that despite Jinwoo's improved body as a hunter, he always suffers injuries. Back in the dungeon, Song tells Jinwoo it's a bad idea to fight the statue and they should find a way to escape. However, there's a brain-damaged guy who refuses to die like this. He starts powering up his power, mentioning he just signed a contract with a major guild and don't want to die here. Song orders the guy to not move. However, the guy starts running forward, mentioning that he's confident that he's faster against every single opponent. He runs toward the door, but the huge statue looks at him. In the end, his body disappears, only leaving his feet. Everyone starts to panic and Jinwoo mentions the statues could easily kill everyone inside. Song confirms it, making Jinwoo wonder why the statue hasn't killed them yet. Usually monsters attack them blindly, but the statue isn't. He then thinks about the commandments and asks Song what was the first one. Song replies it's to worship the god. With those words, Jinwoo thinks this dungeon has some special rules. He gets up with a plan, which initially Song tries to stop him, but after seeing the look in Jinwoo's eyes, Song is sure that he hasn't given up in life. With courage, Jinwoo gets up and notices the statue preparing to attack. He suddenly kneels down and notices the statue stop the attack. He tells everyone to kneel down to the statue, making everyone confused. Song asks if he figured something out and Jinwoo confirms it, mentioning that as long as their heads are below a certain height, the statue won't attack. In short, this is what the first commandment means. He then bows down and Song asks if he's sure. Jinwoo thinks he is and everyone follows his movements. Everyone questions if they will be able to survive by doing this, but the statue's eyes deactivate. Suddenly, the statue starts smiling, making everyone afraid of its expression. They realize the statue isn't attacking them and one of the guys gets up and starts celebrating because the statue won't attack them. The others get up thinking they're saved, but Jinwoo knows this isn't over yet. Suddenly, the huge statue gets up and they scream because they thought this was all over. Song asks Jinwoo what to do next, but our boy doesn't know yet. The statue starts walking forward and Jinwoo mentions that they cannot violate the commandments. He then tells everyone the second commandment to praise the god. Everyone is confused on how they should do it, but another guy steps forward. He claims that he knows how to praise God because of his traditional folklore research. In short, this guy kneels and starts praying. The statue starts to slow down and looks at the guy. However, Jinwoo senses something strange because those are not the words to praise this god. The statue smiles as it lifts its foot while the guy continues praying. In the end, the statue steps on top of him, everyone panics and starts running, but the statue continues stepping on top of some others. The statue starts chasing everyone and one of the guys runs near a statue. His friend tries to warn him to look out behind, but that statue moves and slices him in half. Jinwoo takes Julie to run while thinking about how they can praise the god. She's still panicking and he thinks that he needs to save her. He looks around to the other statues and compares their weapons, until he notices there are some statues with some musical instruments. After a quick thinking, he yells at everyone to get under the statues that have them. Song is confused but follows the orders. The statue starts playing the instrument and Song tells everyone to follow the advice as those statues won't attack them. More people get under those statues and feel relieved because they have been spared. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Juhee manage to reach a statue but it doesn't play. Jinwoo quickly understands the statue won't play because two persons cannot be under the same statue. He orders Juhee to stay under this statue while he goes to the next one. She tries to stop him but he runs as the huge statue chases him. Juhee's statue starts playing the instrument and Jinwoo finds the next one. He's almost stepped by the huge statue, but he manages to avoid rolling towards another one. This statue has a shield who also tries to kill him. Juhee starts screaming his name but Jinwoo managed to avoid fatal damage. He slowly crawls to the next statue, determined to not give up. The huge statue is still walking behind him and prepares to step on him. Suddenly, the statue generally was crawling to start singing. The huge statue barely missed his body but Jinwoo feels relieved as he made it, and he thinks this is the answer to praise God and the huge statue sits down on its throne. Juhee runs towards him and asks if he's fine. Jinwoo confirms, but upon looking down notices that he lost one leg. She tries to heal him with all her power but he says that he's okay. She refuses to stop, but she ends using so much of her power and she starts coughing blood. The group looks around and thinks this is tragic. Yet, despite Song losing one of his arms, some members who voted yes blame him for this situation. Song apologizes for forcing them into a decision and decides to bear all responsibility. Jinwoo watches the discussion and thinks this is not the time to argue with each other because there's still one last commandment. The statue suddenly raises its and an altar raises in the middle of the room. Everyone is confused, but Jinwoo replies that's a common thing in mythology. In short, the statue wants them to make a living sacrifice to the god. That's the final commandment, to believe in God. Everyone gets shocked, but one of the members who voted yes reveals that he knows what this means. He grabs his sword and points at Song and mentioning they need a sacrifice. He goes on to blame Song because his friend wanted to provide for his family and got sliced in half, and since Song claimed that he would take responsibility, he wants Song to sacrifice himself for all the lives they lost. With those words, Song decides to accept his fate as the party leader. He walks toward the altar. Upon reaching close to the altar, a flame appears. Everyone is confused, but Song asks Jinwoo what he needs to do. Jinwoo is still confused about this, thinking they don't need a living sacrifice. He apologizes for the inconvenience and asks if they can take him to the altar so that he can check it. When the three reach near the altar, 3 more flames appear. Song asks if he has figured out something, but Jinwoo hasn't. He wonders if someone will come to rescue them if they wait there. Song explains that since this dungeon has been around for 7 days, the Hunter Association will probably take some actions before they come to rescue them. Jinwoo thinks that if they fail here, this huge statue will run wild into their world. Meanwhile, Jina goes to the hospital to visit her mother like she does every day. She talks about her day and how her friend was late and her future plans. Back inside the dungeon, Jinwoo tells Juhee and the top anime betrays to come to the altar. Despite hesitation, the 2 steps inside, making 2 more flames appear. Suddenly, the altar unleashes some electricity and a new ring of blue flames appear around. The dungeon door suddenly opens up, making everyone worried because this could be a trap. One of the blue flames disappears and the statues start to light up and move forward. They all start to freak out while Jinwoo looks around and notices a strange mechanic. He tells everyone to not close their eyes and look at the statues because they will stop moving. In short, this is basically a game where they all must keep their eyes on those statues. Everyone follows his instructions and the statues stop moving. However, some members are too anxious and start running away from the circle. One of the normal flames extinguished, but she managed to leave the room. The door, however, is starting to close. Song asks Jinwoo if he knows what happened, but he's confused. He thinks about the 3 commandments and thinks the door is a trap because the last one is to believe in God. He believes the door is just to give them a false sense of hope because they're afraid. This is a way to test everyone's faith in the statue. However, another guy also gives in to this hope and throws Jinwoo aside before running toward the door. More people think about leaving, but Jinwoo explains that if someone else leaves, the statues will able to move because of a blind spot. Song wants a better explanation, to which Jinwoo replies they cannot move their eyes from the statues. He explains that the blue flames extinguish, everyone will be able to escape. Yet, there are members who think that if the flames go out, they will be locked inside. The guy reveals he didn't expect Jinwoo, the weakest hunter, to be the most useful one. He thanks him for allowing them to survive, but the guy starts to cry and apologizes before running away. Jinwoo starts crying, asking why they betrayed him. He refuses to give up and desires to survive by quickly looking at every statue. Yet, Song orders Joo-hee and Jinwoo to escape while he stays behind. He thinks that as long as one person stays behind, the door won't close. However, Joo-hee's legs give up. Upon hearing those words, Jinwoo tells Song to take Joo-hee and leave. Joo-hee tries to refuse, but Jinwoo gets angry and shouts that he has no foot so he cannot help her. She starts complaining, but Song knocks her out because they're running out of time. Song then carries Joo-hee outside the door, making Jinwoo relieved because he's the only one who will die. He notices a sword on the ground and picks it up while the statues continue walking. He raises it, promising that he will take one of them to be his best buddy in hell. The statues start attacking him, but he manages to dodge. The statues again attack him, making him lose one arm, followed by several other attacks. He shouts in pain, mentioning that he also wanted to become stronger, but he can't. After several attacks, he's barely alive, but refuses to give up. The statues stab his shoulder, and he remembers those who just betrayed him, trying to justify it by mentioning their family. This is all selfishness, because he also has a family that he wants to return and take care. In the end, the statue lifts him into the air and throws him into the altar while preparing for the last attack. He cries as he doesn't want to die and wishes one last chance. As the statue is about to slice him, the last blue flame goes out. A system message appears asking if he wants to become a player. He says yes. The story continues. We see Jinwoo wakes up in the hospital in shock. He notices that he still has his arm and pulls the blanket to check if he has his leg. After confirming, he thinks that he was stabbed through the chest, but there's no mark. He thinks this was all a dream until someone knocks on the door. The guy is impressed that Jinwoo is awake and introduces himself, Woo Jin-chul, a manager of the Hunters Association surveillance team. Jinwoo wonders what they want from him, but Jin-chul first asks his partner to get the doctor here. That's when Jinwoo finds out he was unconscious for the past 3 days. He asks about Joo-hee and Song, but the guy confirms they're fine despite Song losing his arm. As a result, he will be forced to retire as a hunter. Joo-hee, on the other hand, is still traumatized and getting psychiatric care. In her case, she won't probably continue working as a hunter. Jinwoo thinks about everything that happened, and Jin-chul mentions that only 6 people survived that dungeon. He says that working as a hunter is dangerous, but it's still rare to see this type of outcome. However, he mentions that something was strange. The White Tiger Guild came to the dungeon after being alerted by the guys who ran away. However, they never saw a second room. All they saw was Jinwoo collapsed on the ground. They investigated but found no evidence of the so-called temple or statues that everyone described. Jinwoo and Jin-chul think that's unbelievable. However, every survivor said the same thing, and they found the bodies of the ones who died. Therefore, the Hunter Association cannot suspect the rest of the group for PK everyone. Jin-chul, however, reveals they suspect Jinwoo of experiencing a second awakening. Jinwoo is shocked to hear those words and remembers all he was taught. A hunter's power is determined when they awaken their power and never changes. However, there are some rare cases where a hunter goes through a second awakening. Some of them goes from low ranks to rank A or even rank S. Jinwoo tries to hide his excitement about this possibility. They then pull out a gadget to measure his power and tell him to put his hand over it. Jinwoo smiles, thinking this is his lucky day, and puts his hand. Jin-chul, however, is thinking that it was impossible for Jinwoo to survive that type of described dungeon because he's weak, and since there isn't any evidence of the monsters, he thinks Jinwoo became either rank A or S. However, his score is a big fat 10. Jinwoo is excited to hear the result and what rank he will get now. Jin-chul, however, apologizes for the mistake because Jinwoo are still worse than trash. They leave, and Jin-chul's assistant mentions that every other E-rank hunter managed to get 70 or higher. While walking, Jin-chul thinks they cannot explore that dungeon because it disappeared, but he still doesn't understand how Jinwoo survived. Meanwhile, Jinwoo are in his room thinking sorry for himself, yet he's confused because they never asked him about the screen in front of him. The screen shows that he has unread messages, and he thinks that he's the only one who can see it. He clicks on the screen, but it doesn't react. He suddenly remembers that when he was about to die, the screen showed that he completed the secret quest Courage of the Weak. Suddenly, Gina enters into the room and starts berating him. She tells him to take care of himself because that makes her worried. He apologizes and she complains, mentioning that he always ends up in the hospital while the others are fine. He looks at her and cannot believe he was prepared to leave her behind. He smiles at her, but she complains again. If this happens again, she will quit school and get a job so that he can quit being a hunter. He apologizes again and asks if she can see the Windows screen. She's confused and asks what he is talking about. He apologizes and asks her about games. He wants to know how he can read unread messages, but she thinks he's crazy and should get another medical checkup. He replies that she used to play tons of games and she gives up, replying that he would be able to read it by opening his message box. He repeats those words and the message is open. He notices that he has a daily quest called Strength Training has arrived. He thinks for a bit and remembers the word player was mentioned before. Gina in the end gives up and leaves. Meanwhile, Jinwoo starts reading everything about the system. In short, it was made to help him develop. However, if he fails to follow the system, he will get a penalty. He then sees a screen mentioning the rewards have arrived and gets confused. He then accepts the daily quest and notices that he will become bald like Saitama. He must do 100 push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and then run 10 kilometers. If he doesn't complete them, he will be punished. Jinwoo laughs, mentioning he's in the hospital, therefore that's impossible to do, and takes a nap. Meanwhile, Jin Chul is in the car telling his boss on a call that Jinwoo is still trash. The boss is at least happy the monsters didn't leave the dungeon and started to roam on the streets. However, this is still pretty much confusing. Jin Chul confirms this is weird and they decide to mark this case as something special that will be revised on the future. Meanwhile, in another guild building, the guild leader tells his strongest member Cha to participate in a B-rank dungeon as instructor. She is confused because she's an S rank, but he explains that raid will be a test and practical training for their new recruits. Yet, she still doubts her ability as a mentor. The leader replies she just needs to beat the monsters as usual and everyone will learn from watching. She hesitates, but the guy mentions their guild is on the top 5 of the country, but they're unseen in the international level. He knows their ranks cannot improve, but their teamwork can. Hours later, a gate suddenly appears in the middle of the road. The military takes care of the whole situation while everyone wonders when the hunters are going to show up. Back in the hospital, Jinwoo is still sleeping. The daily quest timer runs down and warns that he failed. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and Jinwoo wakes up. He ends up falling from his bed, but when he opens his eyes, he sees himself in the middle of the desert. He's confused about what's happening and thinks this is just a dream. However, there is a giant desert centipede looking at him. The system window then shows up and tells him to survive for the next 4 hours. Jinwoo is shocked and starts running. Meanwhile, the nurses check his room and notice that it's empty. Jinwoo is doing his best to run and scream from this huge centipede, but more appear. He's been running for 2 hours already. The nurses are looking for him, but they never find him. Luckily, Jinwoo manages to run for the whole 4 hours and returns to his room. The system alerts that he completed his penalty quest, but he collapses before checking the rewards. The nurses then enter his room again and get shocked to see him. The next day, Jin finally gives up being a lazy loser and gets up from bed. He tells his sister on the phone that he will be released soon. After hanging the call, he gets up and starts doing his quest. Days later, Joo-hee receives a call inviting her to join a D-rank dungeon. She thinks about rejecting it and apologizes. The guy on the phone then mentions Jinwoo already awoke and she decides to visit him. At the hospital, she hears the nurses complaining about Jinwoo running and exercising. They complain that hunters are supposed to heal faster than normal people, but they think he's crazy for doing this. Joo-hee looks outside the window and sees Jinwoo running. He takes a small break and talks about this situation. It's been 4 days since the Windows system appeared. Every time he completes the quest he gets 3 types of rewards. He accepts full recovery and returns back to normal as if he never exercised. The other reward is 3 points that he can distribute to any ability he wants. He adds them to his strength and starts to feel stronger. He then talks about having skill and inventory screens. However, he still thinks this is quite strange and he thinks this is just like a game, but everyone around thinks he's crazy. Upon returning to his room, Jinwoo decides to open his final reward, the random loot box. This time he got a key. He's confused because he always got stuff like pens or bandages. Upon checking the information, the system reveals he can use it to enter an instance dungeon in a specific location. He's confused with this, but thinks this is some sort of event that will help him get stronger. Meanwhile, nobody has raided the dungeon that appeared in the middle of the road, the news reveal in which locations new gates appeared. Therefore, everyone should expect traffic delays. Jinwoo uses this time to visit his mother in the other hospital. 4 years ago, she suddenly collapsed in front of him. Turns out that she now suffers from the eternal sleep disease. This is a new disease that appeared when the dungeon gates appeared in the world, and it only affects one in every several 10,000 people. But in short, this only happens when the person is exposed to mana for several times and there's no cure. Jinwoo returns to his room to do push-ups while remembering when he tried to have a normal job. He was slow and weak when suddenly it became easier. It turns out he just awakened as a hunter. He thought this was his lucky day as he could go into the dungeons and be able to pay for his mother's life support. His sister thought it was dangerous, but he told her to trust him. But in the end, even the weakest goblins were able to beat him. Everyone had to save him and complain about his skills. They even expressed that if didn't help the raid, his cut would be reduced. However, Jinwoo simply smiled and apologized, but now if he puts all his ability points into strength, he will be able to become strong. He decides to check the instance dungeon key and goes to a station. He feels confident about his gear and ability to run if he needs to. He then pulls out the key and suddenly a key lock appears. He inserts it and a dungeon appears out of nowhere. He enters that portal and sees the system alert. Suddenly the dungeon exit gets blocked. Jinwoo then sees normal people leaving the station and realizes this is a separate dimension. He thinks this kind of dungeon is something like a red gate. He thinks this is a mess because he cannot run away, but the system explains that he can only leave by defeating the boss or using a teleportation stone. He's confused, but he knows he must beat this dungeon. He still doubts himself. After all, he couldn't defeat the weakest monsters. How would he be able to solo raid this dungeon? He looks at his knife and knows he has no choice. He walks down the stairs and scouts the dungeon. Suddenly, 3 goblins appear in front of him. He's scared and remembers the last time he met a goblin he was stabbed. The monsters attack, but he manages to dodge and parry. He's still a total noob when it comes to fighting and almost gets deleted. He manages to roll like a god Dago and avoid the next incoming strike. He then rushes forward and stabs the goblin. The other 2 try to attack him from behind, but he dodges and follows up by killing the 2. He realizes that he became stronger, yet a wolf appears behind him. The wolf dashes at him and he tries to block. However, his cheap butter knife breaks again. He notices the wolf has a meal jaw and knows this is way stronger than the goblins. He wants to run, but his legs are shaking. He starts to freak out and thinks that he became traumatized by the last dungeon. The wolf runs at him and manages to scratch his face. Jinwoo realizes that he has no healer. If he dies here, he's dead. The wolf then starts running again and lunges at him. The story continues. We see Wolf pounces on Jinwoo, but he dodges away with some impressive acrobatics. He notices his body now feels much lighter than usual. He lands on his feet easily and he decides to overcome his fear and not give up his chance at a second life. He rushes at the wolf and lands a super punch that sends it flying. Jinwoo notices his land steaming from the punch. He wonders if it is a result of his increase in strength. The wolf gets back to his feet and Jinwoo realizes it's still much stronger than him. The wolf charges at him again and Jinwoo counters with his punches, but this time they are not effective. He has no choice but to dodge out of the way to avoid the wolf attack. Jinwoo realized that he would need some help to defeat the wolf. Since he has no party with him, he decides to make use of the resources at his disposal. He makes a run for it, but the wolf claws at his shin. He jumps to create space between them, but he knows he can't keep this up. He wishes he had some kind of magical weapon to use against the wolf. Then he remembers his secret inventory. He opens it up and draws out a magic sword, and as the wolf lunges at him again, he slices it cleanly into 2. A notification screen comes up telling him he has defeated the wolf and leveled up. Jinwoo wonders how the sword got into his inventory because it costs a lot of money, which he knows he can't afford, but he decides not to worry about that. His wounds heal up and he realizes his body doesn't hurt anymore. 2 more steel-fanged wolves show up, but Jinwoo isn't bothered because he now has a weapon to defeat them. He tries to lift up the sword from where it was plunged into the ground, but he can't. Jinwoo starts to panic as the wolves get even closer. He desperately begs the sword to come out of the ground, and he pulls it one more time to dislodge it. The wolves are already lunging at him, but he swings the sword on time to take out one. He swings at the other ones, but it catches it with its steel fangs. Jinwoo doesn't want the wolf to damage his sword after that it took him to get it. He kicks the side of the wolf to make it lose its grip and he defeats the wolf. Another wolf appears out of nowhere and Jinwoo aren't a bit bothered because these wolves are nothing compared to the monsters he faced in the secret room. Jinwoo faced the wolf, but it turns and runs away with its tail between its legs. Jinwoo decides to rest against the wall. He realizes he's now level 2 after getting into actual combat. He never leveled up when he was doing daily quests. His wounds heal up and he notices his stats have all increased by 1 point, making a total of 5 points. Performing daily quests only gave him 3 points. He wonders how much his strength will increase with each point added to his stats. He doesn't know how his stats of intelligence and perception were quantified, but he knows how much his strength increases with each point added. He speculates that he'll be able to get more points the higher his basic ability of that stat is. He realizes he can actually get stronger, but he doesn't want to get carried away from defeating 5 small monsters. He gets up to check for magic gems on the bodies of the wolves. A notification comes up telling him he got an item instead of a magic gem, and he takes out the item, which is a wolf fawn. Jinwoo wonders if the beast he encounters in this dungeon will differ from the gate in reality, since it all seems to be controlled by a game system. The shop screen comes up and Jinwoo tries to buy something, but the game system tells him new players can't buy anything. He decides to sell the fawn and he gets 20 gold coins in return. He wonders what the equivalent would be in cash. He knows it can't be worth much because he's in an E-ranked dungeon. He picks up his sword wondering what to do. He has to defeat the dungeon boss or get the teleportation stone to get out, but he doesn't know where either is. He doesn't feel confident he can defeat the dungeon boss alone, but he thinks he stands a chance if he continues to level up. He suddenly looks up to see an entire pack of the wolves lurking in the shadows. The wolf that ran away went back to call the rest of the family, but Jinwoo isn't scared anymore. They charge at him, but he charges at them all in defiance as well. He slashes and slices them as they dive him. One wolf gets on his back, but he shrugs it off. He's now surrounded by wolves, and he hopes to enjoy the battle, hoping the wolves don't die too easily. His past flashes before his eyes, and a smile crosses his face. He engages all the wolves, happy to battle as long as he gets to level up. He levels up as he cuts them down, and he finally defeats them all, earning the title of Wolf Assassin. Jinwoo is sweating from exhaustion and he realizes his sword is almost broken. He realizes that his weapons are expendable, and they'll eventually wear off, but he's glad the battle is over. He looks over his inventory to look at the items he got from the battle and what remains from his previous inventory. He gets the teleportation stone for completing the battle. He thought it would be much harder to get, and he contemplates leaving the dungeon, but he doesn't know if he'll get another chance to become stronger so easily. He wonders if the dungeon will disappear like a time-limited event in a game if he leaves. He tells like he's being toyed with by a supreme entity and he has no way of escape. He decides to store the stone in his inventory and continue deeper into the dungeon. Juhee gets a call from the Hunter Association and she apologizes for her earlier actions. They tell her a dungeon close by had a break and they need her help because they are short of healers. As Jinwoo goes deeper into the dungeon, he defeats several new beasts and he levels up as he does so, making it easier to defeat each new beast. He takes a while to catch his breath. Through his battles, he noticed that the color of the names of the creatures shows that he's weaker on the same level or stronger than them. When he faced the first wolf, its name was red, but the names of wolf appearing are now colored white. Jinwoo arrives at a flight of stairs and he perceives that he can't defeat the monster waiting at the end of it. He looks at his stats and he notices his level hasn't increased for a while now. His sword is also on the verge of breaking into bits, but he decides to go down the stairs. He gets to the end of it and he realizes the place doesn't look like a train station anymore. He hears a rushing sound and he turns to face it. He sees the monster coming to him at full speed, but he can't react fast enough. The monster knocks him back into the wall and his sword breaks. The area boss, which is a water snake, reveals itself and Jinwoo looks at the color of its names and realizes they are the same level. He looks at the scales of the snake and he realizes his sword would be useless against it, but going barehanded would be even worse. The snake strikes at him, but he uses his sword to deflect the snake's attack. Since the snake attacks so fast and fiercely, he decides to weaken it first, but his sword can barely do anything against the snake scales. The snake returns for another attack, but Jinwoo dodges out of the way, but he enters the range of the snake's tail. The snake smacks him with its tail and it sends him flying into the water. The snake goes for him underwater, but he quickly swims out to safety. The snake doesn't give him time to breathe as it attacks him once he's out of the water, sending him flying a great distance. As he gets back on his feet, he sees a train flying towards him and he has to run out of the way. He thought he was much stronger, but now that he's against the snake he feels so powerless. He grabs hold of his broken sword and wondering how much stronger he must become to stop being ridiculed constantly. He recalls when Song told him everyone was calling him the weakest hunter ever known mankind. Song told him to work hard and make them change their mind. The snake attacks Jinwoo, sending him flying. Jinwoo tries to regain his balance, but the snake doesn't give him a chance to look cool. It pins him against the wall with its body and crushes him till the wall breaks. Jinwoo knows he was called that nickname because he was weak and helpless. He also knows that someone with overwhelming power will remain defeated, and the weak can do nothing but stand still when faced with the strong. People are looked down on if they are weak, even if they are considerably smart. Jinwoo doesn't want to be gentle anymore. He wants to become strong, and that's why he went into the dungeon. He jumps up like a possessed maniac and grabs the snake. He tries to crawl up its body, but the snake knocks him off. Jinwoo gets back on his feet. He vows not to give up till he gets stronger, and a blue aura engulfs him. His hair begins to stand on end and the snake attacks, but he blocks it again, wearing out the snake scale. He feels like he's not giving enough, and he tries to put in more effort. Compared to when he was face to face against God, the snake was nothing. The snake attacks again, and Jinwoo jumps into the air and he plunges his sword into a chunk on the snake scale. The snake tries to attack him again, but he blocks it and slices the snake's side to wear out the scales more. He jumps into the air, and the snake uses that opportunity to open up its mouth and swallow Jinwoo. Jinwoo's sword flies into the air, but the snake looks down to see him holding onto it. Jinwoo uses his strength to crush the snake scale, and the snake is hurt. It bobs and weaves, trying to knock Jinwoo off, but Jinwoo holds on tight. He continues pressing down on the snake's neck with all his power, and he eventually defeats it. He levels up after the battle, and a smile crosses his face. He realizes he did get stronger after all, and he picks up the item he got as a reward for winning. It was a dagger which is twice as strong as his previous sword, and it comes with paralysis and bleeding effects. He also gets a vial of the snake's venom, and he thinks its effects are overpowered. He gets a notification that the dungeon will be reset since he has defeated the boss, and the station returns to its normal state. Jinwoo walks out, but he can't see a person inside. He wonders what the time is. A soldier approaches him asking why he's around the station, and if he didn't hear the announcement. He sees Jinwoo's sword and realizes he's a hunter. He apologizes to him and tells him he'll take him to the site. Jinwoo follows the man, wondering what happened. The soldier briefed him about the dungeon break, and he asks if monsters came out. The soldier tells him most of the monsters have been defeated save for a giant magic beast. Jinwoo would feel the monster from that distance, and he knew that was the boss of the dungeon. The huge magic golem engages the hunters as the police tried to keep citizens behind the barricade. The hunters are giving their all to bring down the golem, but their attacks aren't strong enough to weaken it because it has a high defense. Jinwoo arrives at the site, and he realizes the hunters present don't have a great deal of teamwork. He can also see that most of the hunters are low ranks, and the battle was only prolonged because they had a tank whose rank was a bit high. He looks at the healers and notices there are 2 in D rank and 1 in B rank. The B rank healer is Juhee, but she isn't helping because she's dazed. A fellow healer riles her up to get her to help, but she still hasn't gotten over her encounter with God. She tries to make a healing circle, but she loses concentration and it breaks. Jinwoo notices this, and he sympathizes with her, but he isn't scared anymore. They were facing a D-rank monster which is lower than the one he just faced. He pulls up his sleeves, getting ready to jump into action. The hunters can hardly hold on for much longer, and they pray for a higher rank hunter to arrive. Jinwoo knows he can defeat the monster as long as he can break its defense. He decides to get it with his most powerful hit. He throws his sword with insane force to break the golem's defense. The hunters use that opportunity to defeat the golem. The tank wonders how they were suddenly able to defeat the golem when their attacks weren't effective a second ago. He looks at Jinwoo's sword, wondering how the golem was defeated by it when the combination of their attacks did nothing. He asks the soldier who brought Jinwoo to the site who threw the sword, and he tries to show the tank, but Jinwoo is gone. The tank is terrified of Jinwoo's power, and he wonders if Jinwoo is a high-rank hunter. Jinwoo looks much stronger now, but he didn't think he would break the monster defense with just one hit. He thinks its vitality was already low before he hit it. As he walks away, Juhee notices him. The story continues. We see the nurses in Jinwoo's hospital gossip about how good his body now looks and how cute he is. Jinwoo is doing his morning workout routine in his hospital room. The nurses wonder when he became so buff that they're always surprised when he takes his clothes off. When he first came to the hospital, he wasn't this buff, but they noticed his shape has improved considerably since he started working out. They wonder if it's humanly possible to gain muscles as fast as Jinwoo did. One of the nurses knocks and enters Jinwoo's room, but she's surprised to see him with his shirt off. He apologizes for having his shirt off, and she apologizes for walking in on him. He goes to put on his shirt, but the nurse can't help but admire the firmness of his muscles. She wonders if he always had such a good physique, but Jinwoo asks her what she wanted to say to him. She snaps back into reality and she tells him it's his day of discharge. She asks him if he still has any discomfort, and he tells her he's fully recovered. She tells him to complete his discharge procedures at the counter when he's ready, and Jinwoo thanks her for taking care of him. On a morning news show, the newscaster introduces Baek Hyun-ho. He is one of the 7 S-rank hunters with an impressive resume. She asks him what his life is like away from his missions, and he tells her he spends it training because daily training is indispensable. He tells her he would get rusty if he didn't simulate actual combat. She asks him if it is untiring, and he tells her that he's used to, since he previously worked as a firefighter. Back then, he knew that a small mistake could endanger the lives of his colleagues. Jin-ah is watching the news when she suddenly realizes she's late. She rushes out of the room and calls out to Jinwoo. He tells her to be careful on her way to school. Jinwoo is rubbing his belly and Jin-ah can't help but notice his abs under his shirt. She asks him if he's been working out and he tells her just a little. She notices the height difference between them. She asks him if the increase in height is also a result of his training. She goes to put on her school shoes before heading out, but Jinwoo comes to hand her an umbrella she forgot. He gives her a friendly shove towards the door and she tells him goodbye. After she leaves, Jinwoo goes into the living room and he looks at his daily tasks. He's completed the other except running, and he decides to do that later. He looks at his stats and he sees that he has unallocated points left. He knows he needs enough strength to deal damage, but it would be worthless if he can't hit his target. He sees the importance of the vitality and perception stats as well. He decides to distribute his points between strength, agility, and perception. He gets a call from his landlord and asks if his rent is due. The landlord tells him he's yet to pay rent for that month. Jinwoo tells him he'll transfer the money and the landlord appreciates his response. He tells Jinwoo to take care of himself and they end the call. Jinwoo still isn't sure if he underwent a second awakening, but he can now kill goblins in an instant, so he should be able to earn enough to make a living. He sits on the couch and scrolls through open dungeons he can clear. He knows he has to get a high-level dungeon to get anything meaningful, but he won't be qualified because of his low rank. He contemplates a re-evaluation which will give him a higher rank and put him under the spotlight. With the increased attention he would be able to make more money, but he knows people with a second reawakening are rare and hunters whose stats increase with a level increase are non-existent. He knows how annoying the media can be and decides to drop the idea. He decides to keep his powers a secret till he understands it better. He gets a notification on his phone and he's surprised. He immediately puts on his clothes and goes out to a location. He completes his daily task in the process, and he's about to accept his reward when a man calls out to him. The man introduces himself as Hwang Dong-suk and Jinwoo introduce himself to the man. The man figures out that he's an E-rank adventurer and one of his party members recognizes Jinwoo. He tells the man Jinwoo is famous for being the weakest hunter. Another of his members begins to laugh at Jinwoo's nickname, but Dong-suk tells them to cut it out. He apologizes for their behavior, and he asks the man if he can join them to raid the dungeon. Dong-suk tells him he can tag along to make up for the numbers. He tells him the requirements to enter the dungeon and he tells Jinwoo he won't get any spoils, but they'll pay him a commission. He looks at them and he sees there are 4 C-rank hunters and 2 hunters who are D-rank or lower. Jinwoo asks the man what he will be doing, and the man tells him he will carry their luggage containing their stuff. Jinwoo asks the man if he didn't bring a healer. The man tells him it's difficult for a private team like his to recruit a healer, but they have always managed like that. Though Jinwoo's concerned, the man hands him the contract. He reads through and sees that the party won't be liable for any injuries he incurs. He signs it, and another hunter comes to introduce himself as Eugene-ho. He tells Jinwoo he is a D-rank hunter, who was brought in to make up the numbers. Jinwoo is impressed with his gear, and he thinks Jinho is from a rich family. Jinho asks Jinwoo if the bags are too heavy, but he tells him he's right. He tells Jinwoo he doesn't have to speak so formally. They arrive at the gate, but because of how huge it is, they are skeptical it's actually a C-rank gate. Dong-suk tells them the dungeon was given a C rank by investigators. Jinho wonders if it's okay to enter the huge gate, and Jinwoo tells him only the magic flux matters. He tells him the association measures the flux and ranks the gate. Gates that are B rank and above are handled by large guilds, and those below C rank aren't very dangerous. Jinho is amazed by how much Jinwoo knows, and Jinwoo tells him he has been a hunter for a long time. He confesses that it's his first time entering a C-rank dungeon, and Dong-suk tells his party to follow him. They get ready and enter the gate. The dungeon is dark, so Dong-suk tells one of his members to cast a light. He's surprised that there's no monster in sight and no light in the dungeon. There are usually luminescent stones in a dungeon. Jinwoo remembers another dungeon he visited that was also pitch black. Jinho asks Jinwoo what luminescent stones are and he tells him they are glowing rocks common to cave-like dungeons. He tells him they are found on the floor or roof of caves and they emanate light. Jinho is confused by the loads of gems and stones associated with dungeons. Jinwoo tells him he will get used to it. They got deeper into the cave and Jinho was still surprised there was still nothing inside. He asks Jinwoo if there can be a dungeon without monsters, and Jinwoo tells him to keep quiet. Jinwoo listens hard and he can hear monsters round, but they choose to remain hidden. Dong-suk tells his party to get ready for a battle. Jinwoo is surprised that all the monsters are moving together and rushing towards any light source. He tells them it's an insect-type magic beast and the party members aren't pleased to go against insects. They look at the different holes, trying to predict where the insects will attack from. They all get uneasy as the sounds of the insects get closer. Jinwoo listens for the insects and he perceives them in a hole above the party. One of them opens up the hole and Dong-suk tells them he'll attract the insects while the others attack them from behind. Jinho tells Jinwoo to stay by his side so he's protected. Dong-suk uses his taunt skill to attract all the insects to himself and the other members attack the insects. Jinho wants to get into the action but they tell him to stay back. One of the members uses his strongest attack to take down a lot of the insects and the party pushes forward. Jinwoo is impressed with their teamwork but he feels frustrated. They defeat all the insects and Dong-suk asks Jinwoo how he predicted where the insects would come from. Jinwoo tells him it was his intuition. One of the party members calls out to Dong-suk and they notice the insects were killed by something that bit them and not their swords or magic. They figure out that there could be a monster who preys on the insects. Jinwoo tells Jinho to be cautious because his gear is so expensive. Elsewhere at the association gym, some hunters are working out when they hear a huge explosion. Some are surprised, but one hunter tells them it happens when their guild master is working out. They are impressed with his skills, but Yunho doesn't feel like it's enough for a warm-up. Back in dungeon, Jinwoo tells Jinho more about dungeons, and he asks Jinwoo if he can manage the luggage in such a huge dungeon. Jinwoo tells him he's fine earning more without fighting, but he's suspicious because the deal is too good to be true. He's still uneasy that the group doesn't have a healer and they had to make up monsters. They find more half-dead insects and they're even more suspicious. They think the dungeon boss is around the corner. They're about to move ahead and Dong-suk asks his party member to light up the cave. They move forward, cutting through cobwebs, thinking the boss room is ahead. They find a lot of mana crystals that could make them millionaires. Everyone is fantasizing about what they'll use their newfound wealth to do. Jinho looks at Jinwoo's contract and he tells Dong-suk that Jinwoo should get some crystals since they aren't considered spoils. He tells Jinho, Jinwoo will get his share as soon as they defeat the boss. They have to move the crystals before defeating the boss because the gate to the dungeon will close. They decide to use the opportunity. Since the boss is sleeping, Dong-suk asks his member for his tools, but he tells Dong-suk he left them back at their car. Dong-suk tells Jinho and Jinwoo to stay back while they get the tools to move the crystals. Jinho isn't comfortable with it, but Dong-suk assures him they are safe because the boss is asleep. Those C-rank dungeons require 8 people to clear them. Jinwoo then remembers Dong-suk said they've always cleared dungeons with 6 members. He wonders why there aren't regulars to fill up the number deficit. As they walk out of the room, Dong-suk tells one of his members to seal off the room. They seal off the room and Jinho realizes they've been betrayed. Jinwoo remembers when Song-yi told him about people who do such things and get away with it easily because there is no surveillance in the dungeons. Jinho tried to break through the wall, but it was too strong. The dungeon boss awakens and approaches them. Jinwoo almost feels powerless, then he remembers his encounter with God and he gains confidence. He tells Jinho to step back because he will defeat the monster. He brings out his sword from his inventory and walks forward to face the boss. The story continues. We see one of Dong-suk's subordinates asks him why he's complicating the whole process of eradicating Jinwoo and Jinho. Dong-suk tells him they risk waking the spider if they do that, and that will prevent them from getting them mana crystals. He's convinced that an E-rank hunter and a D-rank hunter cannot defeat the spider. He decides to wait for the spider to eat them up and sleep off before they raid the room and take out the mana crystals. The hunters wonder if they'll have to blast the seal open again when they want to get the crystals, but Dong-suk knows that'll wake the spider up. He tells them he's spotted some paths above the cave they can go down from. One of his hunters asks what they'll do if the boss doesn't fall asleep. Dong-suk tells him they'll have to take it down in that case. He decides to salvage Jinho's gear if they're unable to get the mana crystals. Since his equipment is so valuable, he decides to look up Jinho's family so they can attend the funeral. When the family makes arrangements for it, Q1 thinks the spider will be even more infuriated with the noise of them sealing the road. Dong-suk asks him if he thinks he'll be able to handle the boss by himself. Q1 confesses that he can't handle the boss and Dong-suk agrees with him. He tells him he should not underestimate the boss because Jinwoo and Jinho cannot possibly leave the cave alive. Jinwoo are set to face the boss, but Jinho tries to talk him out of it. He knows that only a B-rank hunter or those of higher ranks can defeat a C-rank monster. He tells Jinwoo he won't be able to do it, and it's better they find an escape route out of the cave. Though Jinwoo achieved his second awakening and leveled up, he can't help but feel that Jinho is right. Though he was able to defeat the D-rank venom-fanged water snake in the instant dungeon, he feels like he's too weak to take on a C-rank. He knows that the spider is miles stronger than the snake and the golem he defeated, but he doesn't feel any pressure from it that scares him. He's finally strong enough not to feel any pressure from a C-rank monster. With how much he has leveled up, he's confident he can defeat a C-rank monster. He smiles hungrily at the thought of battle and he rushes towards the spider. Jinho is surprised by this, but Jinwoo are in full hunter mode and the boss is his prey. Elsewhere, Gunhee sits in the passenger seat of his car and his driver enters the car. Gunhee tells him he's exhausted from the numerous meetings he's had with media outlets and government officials. He tells him he's not good at beating around the bush and avoiding questions. His driver asks him for a sparring match to put him in a better mood. Since his schedule is free, this brings a smile to his face. He tells his driver that though he's a withered old man, he can refuse the request of a youngling for his guidance. Back in dungeon, Jinwoo is engaged in a furious battle with the boss. The boss tries to attack Jinwoo with its sharp limbs, but Jinwoo dodges out of the way each time. He tries to cut one of its limbs, but his dagger doesn't have any effect on it. He's surprised at the hardness of the boss's armor. The boss tries to attack once again, but Jinwoo dodges out, but he's surprised by the power of its attack. He knows that if he's hit by one of such attacks, he'll lose his life instantly, so he decides to be very careful. He rushes at the boss again, and he blocks every attack the boss throws at him. Jinho stands away from the action, amazed at Jinwoo's movement and battle expertise. He can't believe Jinwoo is an E-rank hunter. He thinks Jinwoo must be a false ranker. False rankers deliberately control their magic rating so they can get a lower rank. There are rumors that false rankers are psychopaths who enjoy taking the lives of other hunters. Jinho isn't so comfortable around Jinwoo and he sinks to his knees, wondering why he came for the expedition. He whispers out to his father pathetically, hoping to be saved by some miracle. Jinwoo continues to battle the boss, but he's hardly dealing any damage because of the boss's hide. Jinwoo sees that he's getting quite fatigued and he decides to finish off the boss before he's too tired to move properly. He remembers the special abilities of his dagger and he decides to aim for the boss's weak spot so it can take effect. He decides to aim for his eyes, but as he runs towards it, the boss releases acid. Jinwoo doesn't expect this, but he jumps out of the way to avoid it. The boss is tougher than Jinwoo expected with its array of abilities. Jinwoo knows he can't keep up the battle if things continue the way they are, so he decides to close the distance and land a fatal hit. He uses his new dash skill to quickly get into the air, and he strikes down at the boss, but the dagger's perk doesn't take effect. Since one hit doesn't trigger the dagger's effect, Jinwoo decides to hit it multiple times. Jinho continues observing the battle and he wonders if Jinwoo will be able to see it through. Jinwoo rushes at the boss even faster, and he tries to will his body to go faster, but he's too fatigued. His body stops and the boss swats him into the wall like an annoying bud. Jinwoo lays there, unable to move, and the boss is about to land the finish move, but Jinwoo quickly claims his daily reward and makes a full recovery option. He dodges the boss's attack, but Jinho thinks he was caught by it. Jinwoo comes up from the boss's blind side and he hits its weak spot with his dagger multiple times. The paralysis and drain abilities of the dagger take effect and he eventually defeats it. He levels up after this and he heaves a sigh of relief. Jinwoo was thankful he didn't claim his daily task reward previously. Jinho stares at him in awe. He can't believe Jinwoo was able to defeat the boss all by himself, and he's convinced that Jinwoo is a false ranker. Jinwoo takes valuable materials from the boss, wondering how much it would be worth. Jinho walks up to him and he offers to help him with his luggage and the gems. He offers him a bottle of water and Jinwoo takes it and wondering why Jinho was suddenly so formal. Jinho behind mining the mana crystals and Jinwoo refreshes himself. Dong-suk and his party come through one of the tunnels and they're surprised to find Jinho and Jinwoo alive. Meanwhile, Gunhee is sparring happily with his driver in the teaming room. He parries his driver's attacks and he lands a devastating blow, but the driver blocks it. The force of the blow sends him flying, but he manages to land on his feet. He's bruised from training with Gun-hee, and Gun-hee asks him if he's alright. He tells Gun-hee he's fine and he thanks him for his guidance. Gun-hee thanks him for helping him relax. The training room is in bad shape from their session and the driver commends Gun-hee for being very powerful. Gun-hee tells him his training will pay off when he finds himself in dire situations in a dungeon and he can't rely on his hunter skills. In the dungeon, Dong-suk's party can't believe the boss was defeated. They think it must have been an overgrown spider to be defeated so easily. They know that they shouldn't be able to defeat the boss even with Jinho's gear, so they conclude it was a weak boss. Dong-suk's subordinates ask him for orders and the man tells Jinho that he's impressed with his gear. He found out that Jinho's father was a wealthy man, so he tells him to lay waste to Jinwoo if he wants to go free. Dong-suk is sure that they had figured out that his party recruits hunters to make up numbers, and they take them out and steal their loot. He tells Jinho he can become their accomplice if he takes out Jinwoo, or he'll take them both out. Dong-suk thinks Jinho took the boss down with his gear and he doesn't want to fight against him because he's afraid his gear has hidden perks. He wonders why Jinho isn't making a move on Jinwoo, and he makes fun of him for being afraid of Jinwoo. Jinho finally approaches Jinwoo, but he stands with him and prepares to fight Dong-suk. Since Jinho is siding with Jinhwa, Dong-suk decides to take out Jinwoo since he's weaker. Jinwoo prepares to face off with them, but suddenly an urgent request comes up on his screen. Kwon sees that Jinwoo is distracted and he casts a powerful spell at him that knocks him into the wall. Elsewhere, Hee-jin is standing along the road and some of her friends call out to her. They go into a cafe and they begin to catch up. They talk about happenings in their respective guilds. Hee-jin asks Gina how her training with Miss Cha-hae for the Orange Dungeon went. Other girl then tells her it was annoying because they were all struggling with A-rank monster, but Cha-hae was able to defeat it easily. All the trainees were so surprised by how easily she defeated it. A trainee aspiring to be the next team captain was embarrassed by this. Gina asks Hee-jin about the hunter aspiring to be the captain in her guild, and she tells her she doesn't like him much. Gina tells them they are all lucky to be in big-time guilds. Gina tells them she's had the opportunity to hear different rumors arriving from different sources. Hee-jin asks her what the rumors were about and she tells her she heard there are strike teams with suspiciously high fatalities. Back in dungeon, Jinho looks back at Jinwoo who's knocked out. Dong-suk tells him Jinwoo has passed away and Jinho isn't happy to hear this. Jinwoo wonders how he forgot about the kind of world he lives in. He's about to lose his consciousness, but he notices the system telling him to take out the people who are trying to take him out. He realizes that the system wants him alive and strong, so he gets back on his feet. Dong-suk is surprised to see him stand up, but Jinho is relieved. Jinwoo brushes himself up and he decides to use the system to his advantage. Dong-suk teases Kwon for holding back on his attack. Jinwoo remembers that the strong always prey on the weak. They tease him for being the weakest hunter in the history of humanity, and he asks them if they're ready to be prey instead of hunters. One of Dong-suk's subordinates decides to take care of Jinwoo. He asks Jinwoo what a low-rank hunter like him is going to do. He's in the middle making fun of him when he suddenly loses his voice. Jinwoo makes quick work of him with his dagger and everyone is surprised by this. The system counts the body and they wonder how he was able to defeat their colleague. Though he was just obeying the system, Jinwoo can't believe he just took a life. He knows he would have lost his if he didn't, and he decides to see the battle through to get stronger. They all attack him at once, but he blocks their attacks and dodges out of the way. He takes down another hunter and another one tries to take him out, but he takes him out as well. The others wonder how a low-rank hunter can move so fast. Jinwoo takes out all the hunters one by one and Dong-suk tells Kwon to attack him. Kwon casts a spell, but Jinwoo dodges it and he takes him out. Only Dong-suk is left and Jinho can see that Jinwoo is now much stronger than he was when he fought the boss. Dong-suk can't believe Jinwoo wiped out his entire team, and he figures out that Jinwoo was hiding his true strength. Dong-suk tells Jinwoo he's noticing like his subordinates. He uses his reinforcement skill to make his skin impenetrable to Jinwoo's dagger. He reasons that Jinwoo isn't at full strength since he just fought the boss and his subordinates. He rushes at Jinwoo and tries to strike him down, but Jinwoo is way faster than him and he smashes him into the ground. He tells Dong-suk that though he's strong, he has been leveling up the entire time. Dong-suk can't believe that Jinwoo is an E-rank hunter. He begs Jinwoo to show him mercy in return for payment. Jinwoo is surprised he's begging for mercy after trying to end his life so many times. Dong-suk tells Jinwoo he won't get away with taking his life, and Jinwoo tells him nothing that happens in the dungeon gets out. He finishes him off and the dungeon begins to close, since the boss has been defeated. They come out of the dungeon and an official is surprised that only the low-rank hunters survived. She notices Jinho's gear and she is surprised he has the latest gear equipped. Jinwoo is surprised he was rewarded for taking the lives of the hunters. He gets a new murderous intense skill which reduces all abilities by 50%. The official thinks they survived because of Jinho's gear. While Jinwoo hid behind him, Jinho laughs nervously at her comments and she leaves them alone. Jinho thanks Jinwoo for having his back and suddenly it begins to rain. Jinwoo is glad he gave Jina his umbrella. Somewhere in the city, a huge man is staring out the window ready for some action. The story continues. We see Chief Jinchul receives the report of the 6 hunters who lost their lives in the C-rank dungeon. He sees the survivors are D-rank and E-rank, so he assumes they ran away from the dungeon, which is common. His assistant tells him they didn't run away, but they killed the boss and escaped the dungeon. He tells Jinchul that Jinho has expensive gear, which he's sure was vital to their success. Chief Jinchul tells him to investigate the case if he thinks there's something fishy going on. He tells Jinchul that Jinwoo was the second survivor and the chief remembers him as the sole survivor from the double dungeon. His assistant tells him one of the survivors who lost their lives in the dungeon was Dong-suk. The chief is concerned that the brother of Dong-soo lost his life in the dungeon. Jinwoo returns home and his sister welcome him. She's surprised by the souvenirs he brought home and she asks him if something good happened to him. He tells her he's not sure what happened to him was good, but he was able to save up for their mom's expenses and their needs. Jina thinks it's unusual for Jinwoo to spend money because he's usually stingy. They are having dinner and Jina asks him about his last raid. She thinks his companions must be strong since he came back with no injuries. This makes him remember Dong-suk and his squad and he becomes speechless. Jina asks him if they were able to defeat the enemy, but Jinwoo is lost in thought and he pops open his beer mindlessly. He remembers how he was able to defeat Dong-suk and his gang easily, despite their differences in strength. He didn't hesitate back then and he didn't despise them either. He knew if he would have run if he was still his old self. He wondered if he also became braver as he became more powerful. His beer is dripping into his lap, but Jinwoo doesn't notice this. Jinwoo is feeling remorseful because his opponents were human and not magic beasts. Jina calls his name and he snaps back to reality. She asks him if he's feeling sick, but he lies that he was thinking about the change from the convenience store. Jina tells him not to scare her like that and he decides to stop thinking about the past. He knows he has to get stronger so he can protect his family. He decides to do the same thing if he gets jumped by otter hunters again. He gets a notification saying he has ingested a harmful substance and the system automatically detoxifies him. He tells Jina that he's done eating and she tells him she'll eat the remnants. He tells her not to complain when her overeating makes her get bigger. Jinwoo goes into his room and takes a sip of beer, but the system clears the alcohol from his body and he realizes that he can't get drunk at all. He suddenly gets the rewards from his side quest, which grants him health and longevity. He knows it's the reward from the double dungeon and he now understands why his body is able to automatically clear out toxins. A lot had happened since then and he didn't have time to check his rewards. He was still uncertain about a lot of things. Jinwoo falls asleep, but a knock on his door wakes him up. Jina comes into the room and tells him someone named Jinho called for him. Jina sees the beer can on his desk and tells him alcohol is toxic, but he tells her he's fine. He leaves his room to go meet Jinho in a cafe. Jinho apologizes for suddenly calling him out and Jinwoo tells him he didn't expect to see him again. He tells Jinwoo he's glad they are meeting again because he saved his life. Jinwoo thanks him for giving him the magic gem and keeping the incident with Dong-suk secret. Jinho tells him he understands it was self-defense. Jinwoo asks him why he called him out and Jinho tells him he plans to build an attack team, but Jinwoo immediately refuses. Jinho tries to get him to listen, but he tells Jinho he doesn't want to hang out with a rich guy. Jinho tells him he just needs his help in 19 raids and Jinwoo thinks he wants to become a guild master. Jinho begs him to hear him out and Jinwoo decides to give him a chance. Jinho explains that he wants to get a guild master's license and to get that, he needs to participate in 20 raids. He tells Jinwoo that mission was his first. He tells Jinwoo he can pass the written exam because he studied hard, but he's not confident in his combat skills. Jinwoo knows he's the second in his family construction company and he tells Jinwoo he's doing it for the company because his father wants a guild established. Jinwoo is surprised by this, but he knows dungeons have a lot of valuable stuff that can be used to make everyday items. He figures out that the company wants to have its own hunters conquer dungeons and take all the spoils. Jinho tells Jinwoo his father wants to hire an S-rank hunter as the guild master while his brother becomes the assistant. Jinwoo knows there are only 7 S-rank hunters in the nation and Jinho tells him the S-rank hunter who hasn't joined the guild has retired. Jinwoo figures out that Jinho is going to poach the S-rank hunters from other guilds and he advises him against it because the guild will become his enemy. He tells Jinwoo his brother isn't powerful enough and Jinwoo figures out that Jinho wants to get stronger so he can become the guild master. Jinho tells him his father will believe he has gotten stronger if he completes his raid with a low-level hunter instead of a high-level. Jinho knows Jinwoo should be a B-ranked hunter at best and he's sure teaming up with him would be productive. He slides him some building plans that he wants to give him as a reward for the raid. Jinwoo looked through it and he thinks the amount is too trivial because he could someday become higher than an S-rank hunter. Jinwoo knows teaming up with people who don't understand the concept of leveling up would be dangerous. He rejects Jinho's offer and Jinho begs him that he would keep his secret for a lifetime. If he offers to help him, Jinwoo gives him a deadly glare and Jinho almost jumps out of his skin. Elsewhere, we see Dong-soo tells his assistant to bring him the documents containing the details about Jinwoo and Jinho. His assistant Laura brings it into the room and he's pissed out that his brother lost his life. She tries to comfort him but he cuts her off and demands for the documents. She hands it to him and he asks her what would happen if he took the life of someone in another country. She can't believe he's considering doing that. She tells him he would be prosecuted by the country if it has treaty laws with hunters. She tells him if the country doesn't, their own country would persecute him. She tells him he can be shown leniency if he negotiates with the government. He tells her to adjust his schedule, but she tells him changes to his schedule will affect the guild's operations. He asks her how his schedule is looking and she tells him it's fully booked. He tells her to clear it for later and she goes to arrange it. He sees that Jinho is a D-rank and Jinwoo is an E-rank hunter. He hopes they are still alive when he pays them a visit. Back with Jinwoo, he goes out for his morning routine and Jina tags along. He's surprised she decided to work out today and she tells him studying all the time will be harmful to her. He thinks she's working out because she ate too much chicken. They go for a jog and Jinwoo suddenly asks her what she would do with 30 billion. She wonders why he's asking and he tells her it's just a random question. She tells him she would take care of their mom's medical bills and pay off her college tuition fees. He asks her what she would do with the rest and she tells him she would save it up because it was a lot of money. Jinwoo gets his answer and he tells her to keep up at her own pace. He leaves her in his dust and she can't believe how much stronger a hunter is compared to a human, even though he's at a low rank. Jinwoo looks through his daily quests and he sees that it keeps counting. When he exceeds the gold, he does more push-ups to confirm and he decides to see how far he can run. Jina finally catches up to him but he tells her he's going for another lap and she's dumbfounded. He decides to perform double of his daily quests and the daily quest becomes a secret quest. He accepts his reward for the secret quest and the system gives him a number of boxes to choose from as his reward. He goes for a blessed random loot box and it appears on his hand. It opens up and a miniature sun comes out which turns into a key. The system tells him the location of the dungeon. The key opens and he sees that the dungeon is an S-ranked. He sees that he can get the ingredients for the elixir of life, which can cure all illnesses, and he cracks a smile. Later, he goes to visit his mom and the hospital and he decides to clear the dungeon to get the elixir of life. He begins to open up the gate to the dungeon and he knows that there would be powerful beasts in the dungeon, similar to the ones that gave the S-rank hunters a hard time. He opens it up regardless and he wonders if he can deal with such beasts at his level. He enters the dungeon and he's a bit scared at the sight of it. He isn't too bothered because of teleportation stone he can use to get out of the dungeon if things don't go his way. A three-headed monster called the Hellgate Cerberus suddenly appears, but Jinwoo is unfazed. He knows he can't give up because he has to get stronger and keep leveling up. He summons his dagger and stares at the monster in defiance. His wolf assassin title gives him more strength and he rushes at the Cerberus. He uses his dash skill to go even faster and he slices at the monster but it doesn't deal damage. He slashes the monster several times, but all his attacks are harmless to the monster. He's surprised the gap between them is still so huge after he used his title skill. He decides to use his murderous intent skill, but it gets cancelled out by the Cerberus. The monster attacks him, but he dodges and stabs one of its heads. He casts the paralysis and life debuff of his dagger on the monster, but it cancels it out. The monster attacks him once again, but this time he doesn't dodge on time. The monster sinks its teeth into his arms and Jinwoo screams out in pain as he loses some of his HP. The monster throws him down and Jinwoo is shocked to see he lost a third of his HP just from one of the monster's attacks. The monster is about to squash him, but Jinwoo dodges and gets back on his feet. The Cerberus uses its rage skill to double all its abilities for 3 minutes and it slashes at Jinwoo with its paw. Jinwoo can barely react to the attack before he's hit with so much force and he loses more of his HP. He uses his full recovery skill since he has no choice and attacks the monster. He stabs the monster eye, but the system tells him the monster no longer feels pain. The monster throws him off its head, but as soon as Jinwoo regains his balance, the monster lands a series of attacks that halves Jinwoo's HP. The monster keeps attacking and Jinwoo's HP drops to 30%, his passive skill of willpower kicks in and he gets a 50% damage reduction buff. The monster runs at him and he kicks up some dust to distract it. Jinwoo hides behind a rock and he's glad the system issues him warning at critical times to prevent his death. He decides to hold out for 3 minutes to let the monster's skill end before he thinks it's too dangerous. He's about to use the teleportation stone, but the monster suddenly attacks him and he loses it. He quickly jumps to safety and the system shows him his HP is quite low. He wonders how he'll survive and he decides to go shopping while the monster looks around for him. He gets 3 bottles of an exclusive healing potion, but each bottle only restores 100 HP. He sees the venom of the water snake in his inventory and he decides to take it since he's immune to toxins. The venom kicks in and grants him a 20% physical damage reduction. The monster finds him and attacks him, but he doesn't give up because he can still move. The monster's skill ends and Jinwoo uses that opportunity to land as many attacks as he can manage. He slices and slashes the monster, but it remains unhurt. It attacks Jinwoo and sinks its teeth into him once again and Jinwoo's HP almost drains out. Jinwoo uses his last strength to keep attacking the monster's weak spot repeatedly and the monster finally falls. The system shows that he has defeated the Cerberus and he levels up considerably, his wounds heal and he heaves a sigh of relief. The system shows him the items he got for defeating the Cerberus. He gets a key that opens the door to the demon's castle. He suddenly gets a random item which opens up to reveal the pattern of the elixir of life. He sees that he needs 3 materials to craft the elixir and these materials can be found in the demon's castle. His experience with the Cerberus made him realize that entering the demon castle will definitely lead to his death. He decides to return to the dungeon in the near future, when he's strong enough to clear it. The story continues. We see Jinwoo pays a visit to his mom in the hospital. He looks at the requirements to craft the elixir of life, which can cure all diseases. He wonders if the elixir would be able to wake his mom from her eternal slumber. Though he doesn't have the 3 items needed to craft the elixir, he knows where to find them, but he knows he's not strong enough to enter the place holding the item. He decides to level up even more and get much stronger. Jinwoo sets up a meeting with Jinho in a cafe, and he accepts his proposal to join him in 19 C-rank raid missions. Jinho is surprised Jinwoo agreed, but Jinwoo tells him he only agreed because of certain circumstances. He gives Jinho a condition before he accepts the proposal. He tells Jinho only 2 of them would go on the raid missions. Jinho wonders how only both of them would conquer the C-rank dungeons. Jinho reminds him that they need at least 8 people to enter a C-rank dungeon, and Jinwoo tells him to find people to make the numbers up, just like Dong-suk did. Jinho wonders if the missions won't be too dangerous, but Jinwoo tells him they can complete the 19 raid missions as long as they both remain safe. He tells Jinho his father is sure to acknowledge him if they go through the raid missions unscathed. Jinho considers this and decides to accept Jinwoo's condition. He tells Jinwoo that he'll take care of the extra members and the dungeon gates. Elsewhere, Cha-hae is jogging around a racetrack. She decides to take a break and she dehydrates herself. She stretches her muscles and she realizes someone is hiding behind her. She tells him to come out and she asks him why he's stalking her. He's not surprised that she was able to detect him since she's an S-rank hunter. He tells her he couldn't find a good time to talk to her and he apologizes for interrupting her training. He offers her his business card and we can see his name as Masakazu Tamanaka. Jinho is in a car with his dad, and his dad recalls when the dungeon gates first appeared. Since then, politics, news and social events have been linked to the dungeon. The dungeon houses several infrastructures which are important to the common folk and he knows without it they won't be able to survive. He knows only hunters can bring such valuable resources from the dungeons. The hunters are managed by a government agency known as the Hunter Association. The Hunter Association classifies hunters' registers and manages them. The association is also responsible for assigning and power to dungeons and bearing the responsibilities of dungeon breaks. He knows the government agency can only maintain operations while the guild controls the major resources centered around hunters. The guilds obtain profit acquired from the dungeon. The 5 major guilds in the country comprising those are the Hunters Guild, the White Tiger Guild, the Felm Guild, the Fame Guild and the Knights Guild have monopolized all the resources. He tells Jinwoo he can't just sit back and watch them do that, because the resources vital to common people will fall into the wrong hands. He thinks it should be people who have supported the nation's development that should be responsible for managing the resources. He tells Jinwoo that is the reason they must establish a guild. Jinwoo agrees with his father. He and his brother jointly run a guild that headhunts S-rank hunters, which is quite risky. He's not sure his current self can handle a guild alone. Jinwoo goes out for a jog to complete his daily task. He sits on the park bench and he opens up the game system. He notices the system doesn't count the extra tasks anymore, and he wonders if he can still get a reward like the previous secret quest. He was hoping to get another item from the cursed random loot box, just like the Demon Castle's key. He realizes he may get the key to an instant dungeon. He opens the random loot box, but he gets a bingo card that has already been partly played. He's disappointed by the reward, but he understands that it's a random loot box, so he doesn't worry about it. Jinwoo leaves the park and he walks along the city streets. He looks at his status on the game system and he realizes just 3 ability points are not enough to make him strong. He decides to level up quickly, but he can't do anything but wait for Jinwoo's C-rank mission raids. He remembers a centipede in a dungeon, and he decides to go back to slay them to get more points, but he realizes he would be able to escape more easily, and he may not get points from defeating the centipede. His game system closes as he gets a message from the Hunter Association inviting him to participate in a D-rank gate mission. He sees that he'll not be able to fight alone since the Hunter Association wants to make a team and he wonders if he should decline. He decides to take the mission because it's better than doing nothing and he can't waste any time. Elsewhere, Song's apprentices are training in a dojo. One of the apprentices confesses to his master that he's still not strong enough to defeat him. The master tells him it's understandable that he can't win, but the apprentice still feels ashamed. He wants to spar with the master while he's in an optimal state, but the master is surprised he's not giving up. He gets an urgent call-up message and he said that low-rank hunters are nothing but errand boys for the association. His apprentice asks him if he's ever considered retirement, and he's surprised. He remembers terrible scenes from his previous raid, and he realizes he may be a hindrance since he lost one arm. His apprentice tries to explain that he didn't mean it like that, but the master tells him he wants to do as much as he can for the world before he loses his life. A hunter tells his wife he got called to a raid mission and she tells him to consider giving up his hunter profession. She tells him the profession is too dangerous because a lot of people lost their lives in his previous mission. She reminds him that he almost didn't make it out, but he tells her they need money to get their daughters through school. She agrees with him and he reassures her that the association won't send them to a dungeon that's too dangerous for them. He tells her the last time was just an exception, and she apologizes to him for worrying unnecessarily. She tells him to be careful, and his daughter wonders if he's strong. He assures her that he's very strong and he can defeat powerful monsters. Yunho goes to see Jongin in his office and he's pissed Jongin deceived him. Jongin feigns ignorance and Yunho tells him he pushed the media interview on him. Jongin tells him he saw the interview on TV and he thinks he did very well because his speech was heartfelt. Yunho is pissed Jongin is pushing his responsibilities on him. Jongin tells him his attitude and honest character will represent the hunters and that's what their chairman wanted. He tells Yunho he isn't suited for that. Yunho decides to drop the accusations and he wonders what Jongin summoned him. Jongin tells him he wants to inform him that Eugene Construction, which is the business name of Jinho's dad, wants to establish a guild. Yunho tells him he already knew about it, and he heard they were looking for people to fill up the guild. He knew they were poaching some of his squad members and Jongin realizes he's meddling unnecessarily since he already knows. Yunho is sure Jongin and knew he was aware of all this and he decides to find out what Jongin really wanted to tell him. Juhee gets a call from her mom who wonders if she's alright, since she doesn't call her often. Her mom wonders how her work is going and she tells her it's going fine. Her mother wonders if working as a hunter makes her uncomfortable, since she's so timid. Her mom heard she was a B-rank hunter, but she's not convinced she's strong enough for that rank. She thinks she's a burden to other hunters, so she tells her to come back home and help with the house chores. Juhee gets angry and she tells her mom to stop making decisions for her. She tells her she'll make her own decisions, and she ends the call. She's so pissed her mother thinks she's a burden to other hunters. She remembers how useless she was in previous raids, but she decides to give it another go. She leaves her room, but she gets a message from the Hunter Association asking her to participate in a D-rank gate raid. Cha-hae walks through the Hunter Association building and she stumbles upon Yunho, but he doesn't pay her any attention. She goes into Jong-in's office and he wonders what he can do for her. She tells him she was approached by a scout from Eugene Construction and she wanted him to know about it. She hands him the business card and she tells him they are launching a new guild and they want her to join them as the guild master. Jong-in figures out that she turned them down and he's relieved. She tells him she saw Yunho on her way in and she wonders what they were talking about. Yunho sits in a room alone with a glass of scotch. He remembers his conversation with Jong-in, who asked him about Jeju Island. Yunho wondered why he asked him about the island. Jong-in reminded him that the island was sealed off since the failed raid, and they gave the public updates about the island annually. He knew people were trying to forget about the island and what it represented. Yunho could understand why people would want to forget about the island. Jong-in told him he could never forget about that island, no matter how much people praise him for being the strongest hunter. He told him he intended to clear that island in the near future and he needed him to be on the same page. He wanted them all to gain strength and gather allies, so they could sway the public's opinion about the island. Yunho now understood why he arranged the interview with the media and why he began training new hunters. Jong-in wondered if Yunho also left something behind on the island, and Yunho remembered his friends he left behind during the raid. In a dark room in an unknown location, a suspicious man makes a deal with another man to take the lives of some people. Jinwoo tells Jina he's heading out and she wonders why he has worked during a holiday. She realizes he has been very busy lately and she can't believe he was the same guy who had to take long breaks between each mission so his injuries could heal. She wonders if his training is paying off, and he tells her he can make a steady living now thanks to his training. He heads out and she's surprised he's heading out without his stuff. He tells her he would be alright without them. She tries to stop him, but he walks out. She's surprised because he's going for a raid, not making a quick trip to the convenience store. The dojo master Mr. Song knows his sword will be useless to magic beasts and his martial arts would be useless in a dungeon. He stumbles upon Jinwoo and he's surprised to run into him. He can see that Jinwoo has changed a lot since the last time they met. He remembers Jinwoo lost his leg, but Jinwoo tells him it was healed when he woke up in the hospital. Mr. Song thinks it was a skilled healer who restored his leg, and he's happy to see Jinwoo in good health. Jinwoo is sad because Mr. Song didn't get his arm back, but Mr. Song tells him he had gotten used to it. Jinwoo wonders what Mr. Song is doing around the area, and he tells him he was answering a summon from the Hunter Association. Jinwoo is surprised Mr. Song was summoned by the association just like him. They arrive at the gate and Jinwoo sees the hunters who survived the encounter with God. They're too ashamed to look him in the eye because they sacrificed him for their own safety. Song is suspicious that only the survivors from that dungeon were reunited. Juhee is so surprised by how much Jinwoo has changed since she last saw him. A car suddenly arrives at the gate location and 3 prisoners step out of it. They are glad a lady is part of the group. They start hitting on her, but an association hunter shuts them up. An association official briefs them. She tells them the prisoners are substitute hunters who would be joining them for the mission. They are surprised they would be fighting alongside criminals, but the official tells them the prisoners won't cause them trouble since they want to reduce their sentence. She tells them they would be accompanied by a B-rank hunter called Kong Tae-shik, and she assures them he'll be able to handle the prisoners. Jinwoo suggests that Juhee sit the raid out, but she decides to go since he's going. Tae-shik introduces himself to the group and he wonders who would lead the raid. Mr. Song decides to lead, and he thanks Jinwoo, making sure they came out alive the last time he led them into a raid. Tae-shik is suspicious of Jinwoo, but it's time for the hunters to enter the dungeon, so they gather at the gate and proceed through it into the dungeon. The story continues. We see inside the dungeon, the prisoners are actually doing a good job wiping out some goblins. Mr. Song wonders who the real beasts are and demonstrates his own power. The group of goblins is eventually wiped out and Mr. Song impressed by how much stronger Jinwoo has gotten. Even Juhee points out how Jinwoo hasn't gotten hurt yet, and she hopes that no one ends up needing her to heal them. Mr. Song is still amazed as even Jinwoo's aura is different. Tae-shik has them move forward, but they find a split in the path. The dungeon has been much easier than they expected, so they determined that it should be fine to split up. They will be taking on a bit more risk, but they will be able to clear the dungeon faster. Jinwoo is able to sense that the dungeon boss is down the path on the right side, but he doesn't tell anyone. He hasn't been leveling up much from the weak goblins, so Jinwoo requests that his group go down the right side path. They split up, but Tae-shik oddly stares at Jinwoo. Kim's group member is the other coward, and Kim decides that they will have to apologize to Jinwoo for abandoning him on the first raid. They are sure that he won't accept their apology, but Kim determines that he must try if he wants to continue being a hunter. Down the other path, the prisoners easily wipe out another group of goblins. Taeshik strangely asked if they will be able to do the same against humans, and they point out that it would make no difference. A look into the past shows that Taeshik was told that some guy's daughter was assaulted by 3 men. His daughter took her own life afterwards, but this guy was furious, since the 3 guys would be set free from prison in just a few years. To make things worse, they're hunters, and hunters are allowed to participate in raids to reduce their sentences. This is incredibly unfair since his daughter will never get to come home. The man brought 3 million yuan and offered to give it to Taeshik if he eliminates the 3 prisoners. Taeshik is absolutely crazy, as he now tells the prisoners what he will tell the inspectors when he leaves the dungeon without them. He will say that the prisoners were eliminated by a pack of 100 goblins. Kim continues down his path, but he is shocked to find that it touches to Taeshik's path, and he finds Taeshik massacring the prisoners. Taeshik tells the prisoner that he was told to make them suffer, but he is interrupted by Kim. The cold-blooded Taeshik eliminates the last prisoner and decides that he will have to change his plans as he makes his way towards Kim. Jinwoo thinks about how Taeshik saw him at the hospital and he just hopes that he doesn't remember him. Just then they hear screaming and they rush to find the dead prisoners. Kong has been eliminated as well, and Jinwoo shocked when he sees Kim in bad shape. Joo-hee heals him, but Mr. Song tells that this was not the work of a magical beast. The weapon used was too sharp and whoever used it avoided finishing him off multiple times. Kim has given up on surviving, but Jinwoo reminds him that he has a family. Jinwoo demands that he stay alive, otherwise he won't be able to keep blaming him. Kim uses his last breath to apologize to Jinwoo and he passes away. Just then, Taeshik tries to eliminate Joo-hee but Jinwoo stops him. Taeshik is impressed with how fast he is and Mr. Song realizes that Taeshik is responsible for the massacre. Mr. Song is shocked since Taeshik is part of the Hunters Association, but Taeshik just wants to tell them his plan. Instead of blaming the goblins, Taeshik will say that the prisoners eliminated all the other hunters. He will then say that they tried to take him out, but they couldn't do that, which will be why he was the lone survivor. Mr. Song holds Jinwoo back as he doesn't believe he can take on Taeshik. Mr. Song will fight him instead, but he thinks about how long is the B rank, 1 whole level above him. Joo-hee gives him a strength buff and Mr. Song tries to use his sword skills to take Taeshik down. Taeshik manages to avoid even being touched once and he commands Mr. Song for knowing his stuff. Jinwoo analyzes the situation and can tell that Mr. Song is managing to hold his own, but he isn't fast enough to win. Taeshik manages to land a devastating blow, but he gets annoyed when Joo-hee quickly heals Mr. Song. Taeshik decides to take her out first, but Mr. Song stops him. Taeshik underestimated the old man, so Mr. Song explains that he has trained S-rank hunters before. His blade is outmatched, but Taeshik points out that the power Mr. Song has been given have their limits. There is no chance a mage type like him can defeat an assassin type, so Taeshik brings in near death. Joo-hee too frightened to heal him, so Taeshik prepares to end Mr. Song's life. Mr. Song uses his fire ability but Taeshik is just too quick. He realized that Mr. Song used his sword to make him lower his guard against magic. Mr. Song was waiting until Taeshik tried to end his life to surprise him with a fire blast. Taeshik saw right through his plan though, and Mr. Song will now pay with his life. Just then, Jinwoo finally steps in to stop the fight. Taeshik demands to know who he is, so Jinwoo explains that he's simply an E-ranked hunter. Taeshik doesn't believe him, since he would need incredible reaction speed to stop the attack he just used on Mr. Song. Taeshik can tell that Jinwoo was hiding his power and determined that he had a second awakening. The others are shocked and Taeshik just now remembers Jinwoo from the hospital. The mana reader only read 10 at the time, so Taeshik thinks that the second awakening must have come after that. This doesn't make sense though, as it doesn't explain why Jinwoo was able to survive the double dungeon. Taeshik determines that it actually doesn't matter, so he prepares to eliminate Jinwoo. Jinwoo wants to know what happened just now, so Taeshik explains that he was just carrying out justice by taking out the prisoners. Jinwoo couldn't care less about them, but he wants to know why he eliminated Kim and Kong. Jinwoo points out that Kong could have done it quickly, but he didn't. Instead, Taeshik seemed to have tortured and toyed with them. Another look back to when Taeshik spoke with the father shows Taeshik explaining that he has received huge offers to join the largest guilds. However, he chooses to work for peanuts in the Hunters Association. The reason he has chosen this path is because he finds people much more fun to kill than beasts. A fight breaks out between Taeshik and Jinwoo, and the two spectators are amazed by their blinding speed. Taeshik can tell that they have practically the same build, but he determines he has much more experience fighting high-ranked opponents. Taeshik uses this experience to take control of the fight, but he is shocked when Jinwoo asks him to be a little less bloodthirsty. It's too late though, as Jinwoo's system has taken notice. The system, just like last time, informed Jinwoo that there are people present that want to eliminate him. Jinwoo is then once again given a quest to eliminate his opponents. Jinwoo is engulfed by a dark power, but calling this confused since he thinks he should have the advantage in this fight. Jinwoo instantly attacks, and Taeshik shocked when he realizes that he has been poisoned. The two continue fighting, but Taeshik has something special to show him as well, and he disappears. He explains that this is the stealth skill. It conceals the sight, sound, and even his smell. Only a tiny fraction of hunters can obtain this skill, and no one knows he has it. Taeshik manages to hurt Jinwoo, and he tells the others to stay back and wait for their turn. Taeshik is certain that Jinwoo won't be able to do much now with an injured leg, but he's shocked when Jinwoo instantly heals himself. Taeshik is in disbelief since he has never heard of a combat hunter who could also use healing magic. Jinwoo is completely unpredictable, and this makes him very dangerous. Jinwoo has seriously changed, as he explains that he just lost another one of his emotions, and now he doesn't even need to get angry to kill filth like Taeshik. Taeshik realizes that Jinwoo has taken human lives before, and Mr. Song shocked to hear this. He determined that Jinwoo has probably had to make some tough decisions in a short amount of time, and that is why his appearance was not the only thing that changed. Taeshik moves in to continue attacking, but he is shocked when Jinwoo was able to track him just by sensing his bloodlust. Taeshik still has a trick up his sleeve, but everything stops when Jinwoo activates his murderous intense skill. Taeshik is surrounded by darkness, and he is stunned when Jinwoo's blade pierces his chest. As Taeshik's life fades away, he points out that he and Jinwoo are the same. They are both killing machines, and the only reason why he is dying is because he was simply weaker than Jinwoo. Taeshik still wants to know what Jinwoo is. He has assassin skills, healing and debuffs, and Taeshik has never heard of someone like that. Jinwoo doesn't tell him anything, but Taeshik points out that Jinwoo was able to eliminate him, so his E-ranked act is over. Jinwoo decides to tell him something and just explains that he is someone that gets stronger with every fight. Taeshik can tell that Jinwoo will keep getting stronger and stronger, but he has a warning for him. If he goes too far searching for more and more power, that same power might take control of him. Jinwoo's quest is complete, and he got some rewards. Jinwoo has noticed that the stronger he gets, the more he feels like something inside of him is falling apart. His friends thank him for saving them, but Jinwoo tells them to leave the dungeon. They are shocked to hear that Jinwoo plans to clear the dungeon alone, but they realize that he is strong enough to do it. Outside, Jinchul is shocked to hear that Taeshik was killing in secret. He is shown the only survivors of the mission Taeshik was on, and he's surprised to find that one of them is Jinwoo. He apologizes for what happened, but more importantly, he wants to know who was the one that defeated Taeshik. Jinwoo realizes that he won't be able to keep his secret anymore, which means he will have to cancel his deal with Jinho. Just before he admits to everything, Mr. Song lies and says that he was the one that eliminated Taeshik. Mr. Song is only a C rank, so he explains that he only won the fight because he had the help of a healer. Jinchul is skeptical as Taeshik was a top B rank hunter, but he accepts Mr. Song's answer. Just then, Jinwoo reminds himself that he cannot get overconfident. He could until before, but Jinchul was an A-rank hunter. He can sense his immense power now, and he can tell that it is current strength. He wouldn't stand a chance against this guy in a fight. Mr. Song determines that Jinwoo has a good reason for keeping a secret, so he tells Jinwoo that this is just him paying him back for what happened in the double dungeon. That night, everything has been settled, and Joo-hee wonders if Jinwoo remembers the stone he gave her. The story continues. We see Jinwoo and Joo-hee take a little walk while they discuss how much Jinwoo has changed. Joo-hee is the complete opposite of him, as she hasn't changed at all, and she realizes that she is too timid to be a hunter. She should really be participating in A-rank raids, but she chooses the lowest rank ones instead. It's not terrible since it allowed her to meet Jinwoo, and she began healing him. He would always get hurt, but she could never forget how his eyes always had that determined look in them. Joo-hee returns the crystal he gave her and reveals that she will be retiring. She will be going back to live with her parents, but the two agree to hang out if they ever see each other again. A look back shows that Jinchul was very skeptical of Jinwoo. He didn't believe that an E-rank like him could defeat the B-rank Taeshik. Jinwoo was already found to not have had a reawakening though, so Jinchul just let him be. He did, however, issue him a warning. Dong-suk's brother Dong-soo has heard that Jinwoo and Jinho were the only survivors after his brother was eliminated, so he may be coming after them. This is extremely shocking since Dong-soo is an S-rank hunter. Dong-soo likely doesn't care about all the facts, and he is the type to be upset just because Jinwoo survived and his brother didn't. Unfortunately for Jinwoo, the law is powerless against S-rank hunters, and they have the potential to bring forth either a miracle or a calamity. One of these monsters is after Jinwoo, so Jin Chul recommends that he get his family and leave the country. Jinwoo just determines that this is another reason to have to become stronger, since if he doesn't then he won't survive. Jinwoo arrives to meet with Jinho, but he's very confused by what he sees. Jinho explains that this is their strike team. He prioritized finding people who are qualified hunters but have reasons why they can't work and are struggling to make a living. Jinwoo points out that he hired a high schooler, but she points out that she is a qualified hunter, just like them. She gets discouraged though when Jinwoo figures out that she's an E rank with no raiding experience. It doesn't actually matter though, as Jinwoo informs them all that they will be waiting outside while he and Jinho take care of everything. They will all be getting paid 3 million yuan each, which is a great deal since they won't actually be doing anything. The only thing is that they can't tell anyone about it, otherwise they will have to pay back 10 times the amount they were given. Jinwoo received a stealth runestone for defeating Taeshik and he uses it to learn the stealth skill. Jinho is ready to go and Jinwoo's shocked to see that he has put on some more insanely expensive armor. Jinwoo proves how illogical it would be to wear that armor and demand it's take it off. Jinwoo allows him to at least keep the helmet though, and the two enter the portal. The other hunters think they are crazy for going into a C-rank dungeon alone, but they don't really care since the contract is already finalized. Jinwoo's sister wonders where her friend Song-yi is, and we see that she's the high schooler on Jinwoo's strike team. The hunters discuss how full strike team would take 2 hours to complete this raid, so when they see you appear out of the portal, they assume that they just ran away. Of course they are shocked to see that the gate is closing after they exit, which means that they have cleared the dungeon. The hunters stare in disbelief, but Jinwoo just tells them to hurry as he wants to go to another portal. Their goal is to hit 3 raids in one day, but the hunters are all still shocked that they even completed one. During another raid Jinwoo destroyed a bunch of goblins. While Jinho finishes up mining, Jinwoo finishes up the goblins and levels up. The next raid is a success as well and General levels up even more. Days passed and the two just keep clearing dungeons by themselves. They begin to face stronger and stronger monsters, but Jinho can tell that Jinwoo is getting much stronger as well. Jinwoo's stealth skill is really useful and his dash skill levels up. He earns a couple more skills and finds that they're really powerful when he uses them on a wolf. Jinwoo has a bunch of new skills now, but not enough mana to use them for very long. He takes a potion for this and decides that he will focus on increasing his intellect ability going forward. He also decides against returning to the Demon Castle right now, since he would consider himself to only be somewhere between a B rank and an A rank hunter. Just then, the system reveals that he has reached the required level for a job change quest. Elsewhere, the manager of another guild named Sangmin is told that there's a strike team spending double the market rate for the rights to buy some C-rank gates. Their leader is the rich kid Jinho, but their team seems to have just been thrown together. On recognizes the name Jinwoo from the double dungeon incident, and he gets a feeling that there's something interesting going on. Elsewhere, Jinwoo and Jinho emerge from another portal victorious. Jinwoo wonders if Song-yi has some kind of eye problem, but she says it's nothing. Back with Sangmin, his assistant is shocked to hear that he thinks that Jinwoo has reawakened. Jinwoo managed to survive 3 major disasters. There was a large body count every time, but he was always among the survivors. Reawakening is the only way this could be possible, so Sangmin heads off to scout the promising rookie. Sangmin arrives at the portal Jinwoo's in, but he is shocked to see that it looks like some kind of picnic. Song-yi explains that the area is off limits, and must point out to them that she is a hunter. She admits to being part of the strike team, and Sangmin is shocked to realize that Jinwoo left the entire group behind to enter the dungeon himself. Sangmin thinks Jinwoo might be his biggest find yet, but he surprisingly just leaves. The guys emerge from the gate and Jinwoo reveals to Jinho that he's busy tomorrow. He won't be able to go on any raids, so they hold off on a few of them. We then get a glimpse of a very strange scene, and Jong-in wakes up from the nightmare. He takes a look at some paperwork and determines that it's almost time for the reconnaissance mission on Jeju Island. Jinwoo finishes up his day of raiding and Sangmin introduces himself as the manager of the White Tigers Guild. The White Tigers Guild is one of the country's best, and they're always on the lookout for promising new talent. Sang-min thankfully gets right to the point and offers to pay Jinwoo double what Eugene Construction is paying him if he joins his guild. Sang-min is confident that an E-ranked could never reject this offer, but he is surprised when Jinwoo wants to know how much the White Tiger Guild headquarters is worth. It's worth 50 billion, so the guy is shocked when Jinwoo reveals that the construction company is giving him a building worth 30 billion. Jinwoo shows him proof, but Sang-min reveals that he isn't qualified to offer them their 50 billion building. Jinwoo leaves as he has lost interest, but he does want to know how Sang-min heard about him. Jinwoo strikes fear into this guy but making sure that he wasn't snooping around, and he disappears. Sang-min realizes that Jinwoo used stealth to cut him, and he is shocked when he thinks about how Jinwoo is reawakened with the stealth ability. Jinwoo tells him not to turn around, so Sang-min explains that he was just investigating who was buying up so many gates. Jinwoo demands to know who else knows about him, but Sang-min explains that it's just him and one of his subordinates. Jinwoo warns that if people start hearing about him, they will be the first people he suspects. Sang-min agrees to keep everything a secret, so Jinwoo reveals himself again. Jinwoo has to keep buying the gates for a while, but this causes problems for the guild, since they need to train recruits. Jinwoo agrees to let them buy 3 gates from him, but Sang-min is shocked when Jinwoo tells him that they will have to pay 300 million yuan for each. The guy begs him to lower it to 200 million and Jinwoo surprisingly agrees. The two make the deal for 3 gates, but their interaction is not over yet, as Jinwoo wants to give him something. He tells Sang-min to close his eyes and open his mouth, so Jinwoo gives him a potion to heal the cut on his face. Jinwoo reveals that he trusts Sang-min, but he reminds him to keep his mouth shut. Sang-min's assistant wonders how things went, and Sang-min tells them that he thinks that Jinwoo might be an even bigger deal than he thought. The next day Jinho confirmed that they have received the 600 million yuan. Jinho point out that they were going to cancel those gates anyway, so he can't believe that Jinwoo managed to get so much for them. Jinho wants to know more, but Jinwoo explains that it's a trade secret. Back with the White Tiger Guild, Sang-min realizes that Jinwoo scammed him, as several C-rank gates appeared and they are all selling for less than 70 million yuan. Jinwoo sends him a message stating that they're even now for Sang-min spying on him. Sang-min realizes that Jinwoo is not someone to be messed with, but he's glad to have gotten his contact information. Elsewhere, we see that Jinwoo moves on a road trip as he goes to find out what his job change quest is all about. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.